on Unsolved Mysteries. A rookie police officer in a small town is shot to death. Was he murdered to cover up a police conspiracy with local drug dealers? In 1947, an object crashed near Roswell, New Mexico. Witnesses claim that it was a UFO and that there were aliens on board. 2 inmates break out of jail and set off on a brutal killing spree that leaves 4 people dead. And 3 friends out for a joyride drive straight into violence.
5 cases with strange clues and bizarre twists, and secrets that you would never expect. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries.
Mountain Air, New Mexico. Steve Sandlin was born to be a policeman. His father was a career law enforcement officer, and Steve planned to follow in his footsteps.
Because I was a policeman, Stevie grew up seeing a uniform. He liked it. He used to wear my helmet, wear my motorcycle boots. He'd go around the house all day dressed up like a cop.
Steve wanted to be a police officer, and nothing was going to do until he did it.
At the age of 21, Steve became one of only 4 officers in the Mountain Air Police Department.
Mountain Air 4, 10-8.
But one evening, while he was working alone in the police station, Steve's dream came to a violent end.
I can't recall the exact wording by the individual that notified us, but when we arrived, he mentioned something about Steve upstairs, a gun, and blood, and he didn't know if it was a joke or real or what. We had our weapons drawn. We weren't sure what we were walking into. And I went to Steve.
Hang on, get him rolling, Gary.
And asked him what had happened. He was unresponsive, he was breathing, but he never did say anything. We immediately called emergency services, ambulance personnel, and they immediately started their life-saving operation to try and save the officer's life. He was still alive at that time. They were in the process of trying to start an IV. And shortly thereafter, Officer Sandlin expired, and he was pronounced dead by the doctor here at the scene.
Steve Sandlin had been on the force for only 8 weeks. His gun was found by his side. Police believe that the fatal bullet had been fired from his own weapon. Most concluded that Steve's death was either accidental or a suicide, but others disagreed.
Those of us who knew Steve know that there is no way that it could have been a suicide or even an accidental shooting. We believe Steve was murdered, and we believe there was a conspiracy to do so.
The cause of Steve Sandlin's death sparked a heated public debate. The most disturbing allegation? That the identity of Steve's killer was known, but had been deliberately covered up.
On the afternoon of Steve's death, he returned to an empty police station after arguing with Chief Carson over some traffic tickets that Steve had written.
What I told Steve was, Steve, slow down, son. You can't catch everybody. That's not your role. Just take it easy. And he seemed a little down about that. He wasn't chewed out. It was just a conversation.
Hey, Shell, how you doing?
By 7 o'clock, Steve was alone at the station and talking with his girlfriend on the phone.
Great. She'll be so happy.
We were making plans for the next day, and he said that Chief Carson yelled at him and told him to go back into the station. So he was kind of mad about that, and he said if they wanted him to be a security guard, that he would sit up in the station and be a security guard. And while I was talking to him, I heard a lady's voice come in, and he muffled the phone, and I couldn't hear what it was said, but it sounded like he was getting loud and like she was yelling at him. And he said it was no big deal, and then he said he had to go.
At 7:45, Chief Carson learned that Steve had been shot.
I saw no evidence of any confrontation, no other shots fired, nothing. And from an average person's point of view, it was apparently a suicide.
Chief Carson also believed that if Steve's death wasn't suicide, then it was a tragic accident.
There was information that came to us that he was prone to play with his gun. I can see the possibility that perhaps he was playing with his gun, and I think that that probably is the strongest possibility in Steve Sandlin's death. The possibility of it going off is tremendous.
The results of Steve's autopsy were inconclusive. Some believe that the gun may have been as much as 2 feet away from Steve's head when it was fired. Not typical of a self-inflicted wound. And there were only minor traces of gunpowder found on Steve's hand. Unusual if Steve had fired the fatal shot. Despite this evidence, the state attorney general refused to rule out suicide. Frustrated with the finding, Steve's family began their own investigation.
Steve's death was a homicide. I think they killed him to keep him quiet of something he may have known that was going on down in Mountain Air.
The family's investigation uncovered a strong motive for Steve's murder. After only a few weeks on the job, Steve had begun to go out on patrol alone, sometimes waiting outside a local bar for drunk drivers.
Sir, I'm gonna need to see your driver's license, please. Sir, you're gonna have to step out of the car. Put your left hand outside and open the door from the outside.
Just 1 month before his death, Steve pulled over a driver and found more than liquor on his breath.
Is this yours? Sir, I'm placing you under arrest with possession of marijuana. Put your hands on the car.
The following day, the man's home was searched. Steve's hunch was correct. Police seized 54 pounds of marijuana worth more than $100,000. Within days of the arrest, Steve received death threats. Concerned, he refused to sleep at home.
It wasn't possible to trace these threats, mysterious phone calls, these kind of things. We were all familiar with these type of threats, especially after we started arresting drug dealers and so forth. They became more amplified.
At the time Steve was killed, the Mountain Air Police Department was being investigated for mishandling evidence.
The last time I spoke to Stephen indicated that there was something going on that he did not agree with down in Mountain Air. He asked me what would I do in that situation, and I basically told him to tell the truth.
So how long have you been with the Mountain Air PD?
Soon after talking to his father, Steve was questioned by the New Mexico Attorney General's office. It was the day before his death.
I think someone killed Steve Sandlin intentionally. I say that because there's no evidence that it was suicide, there's no evidence it was accidental, and there's very strong, persuasive evidence that he was murdered and that his murder was planned.
Shortly after his death, Steve's house was searched by police. 3 days later, his family arrived to pick up his belongings.
Michelle and I were in the kitchen, and she opened a drawer.
Ed, come here.
What we found in the drawer were several bags of marijuana. And Ed looked at us and said, "They've already searched this house. What's this stuff doing here?" He says they couldn't possibly have missed this. And they couldn't have. You just opened the drawer and there it was. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't disguised in any way. It was just there.
The only reason that I could think of it being there was someone had made an attempt to make Officer Sandlin look bad,
Step back, I need to see your driver's license.
or possibly the police department look bad. But I'm convinced that that marijuana was planted there after Steve Sandlin's death.
Steve always recorded information about his traffic stops on a small tape recorder. In her search, Steve's mother discovered that all of his taped cassettes were missing.
Several witnesses were found who stated that they saw Chief Carson parked or outside the Mountain Air Police Department between 7:15 and 7:25 or thereabouts. We're not talking one, two, but several people place him there at that time.
Anyone who would make the statement officially that I was in the area or here at the police station anytime between 7 and 7:30 is a liar. So I was in the company of 200 to 300 people at a public function at the Mountain Air High School. And there are a number of people that I was there with and spoke with that can place me there at that time.
There are many disturbing questions in this case.
Steve, come on.
If Steve was murdered, who pulled the trigger? Was the marijuana placed in his house? And if so, why? And finally, are members of the Mountain Air Police Department hiding information about Steve's death?
I did agree to take a lie detector test for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. After that polygraph was given, his official statement was that the Federal Bureau of Investigation has no reason to believe there was any attempt to deceive them on my part whatsoever.
I don't know if it's cronyism. I don't know if there's other people involved, and no one's telling us. That's the main frustration, is that there are things that we know and can't understand why things are not being done about them.
Update. Authorities have learned that 5 months before Steve Sandlin was killed, law enforcement received a tip that a police officer was going to be shot by drug dealers. Lacking specifics, police were unable to take action. Steve's death has been officially reclassified as a homicide. Recently, his name was added to a memorial honoring New Mexico police officers killed in the line of duty. The case remains unsolved. If you have any information, please log on to our website at unsolved.com. Next, could there have been aliens on board the UFO that crashed in Roswell, New Mexico? In 1947, this startling headline appeared in the Roswell, New Mexico Daily Record. The story that followed became the first chapter in the modern era of UFOs. The events began with a violent storm on July 2nd, 1947. A few days later, a local rancher led 2 military officers to a field where something had crashed during the storm. Major Jesse Marcel Sr., an intelligence officer and combat pilot, was unable to identify the debris. Jesse Marcel Jr. was 11 years old at the time and vividly remembers the night that his father brought home pieces of the wreckage.
What is it?
I have no idea.
He is one of the few people who claim to have handled it. Marcel recalls that the most remarkable fragment was a short piece of I-beam covered with strange symbols and markings.
Years after this incident happened, we would talk privately among ourselves about what the possibilities of what this thing was. And I feel that I know that we came to the conclusion that it was not of earthly origin. This writing could be described as like hieroglyphics, Egyptian-type hieroglyphics, but not really. The symbols that were in the I-beams were more of a geometric-type configuration in various designs. It had a violet-purple type color, and was actually an embossed part of the metal itself.
Other witnesses have claimed that the Army not only recovered the wreckage of a UFO, but also the bodies of its occupants. Captain Pappy Henderson was stationed at Roswell in 1947. 2 years before he died, he described what he saw to his wife.
My husband told me the bodies were smaller than human bodies. The heads were larger, and the eyes were rather sunken and a little slanted. Clothing was of material unlike anything he'd seen before. They were strange, not of this earth. When my husband, who was a man of truth, trusted with 29 different Army aircraft planes, first pilot, aircraft commander, tells me this story, I believed him.
Shortly after the details of the crash were made public, the Army changed its story. They admitted to making a serious mistake and announced that the flying saucer wreckage was, in fact, debris from a downed weather balloon. For almost 50 years, the events that took place at Roswell and the official explanation fueled suspicion of a cover-up. The Air Force has always insisted that rumors of an alien contact were just that, rumors.
But new witnesses continue to come forward, claiming that the Roswell story is true. Of all of these reports, the account provided by a man named Glenn Dennis is just too compelling to be ignored.
In 1947, Glenn Dennis was 22 years old and just out of college. That summer, he was working at a funeral home in Roswell. 2 days before the UFO story broke, Glenn received a strange phone call from the Roswell Air Base.
He's not in, but this is Glenn Dennis. Can I help you?
Glenn, this is Captain Miser. I'm the mortuary officer over at the base.
Yes, sir.
He was wanting to know what size hermetically sealed baby caskets do we have? Did we have specifically 3 feet, 6 inches, or did we have maybe no larger than a 4-foot hermetically sealed casket?
That afternoon, Glenn was called to transport an injured airman to the Roswell base. When he arrived, he was surprised to find the base infirmary surrounded by MPs. 2 ambulances parked at the curb immediately caught his attention.
I looked into the ambulance. I saw quite a bit of wreckage of some type. It looked like stainless steel that had come in contact with a high degree of heat. It was a purplish, bluish color. I noticed one large piece of the wreckage. It looked like there was some Egyptian hieroglyphics.
Sergeant, seal off that corridor.
The confusion at that day that I was out there was so great that I don't think anyone really knew what the other man was doing. And I don't think they even knew each other. I think they were brought in from different military bases or whatever.
Sir?
Can I help you?
I'm Glenn Dennis with the Ballard Funeral Home, and we have a contract with the base. There was a crash outside. Do you want me to go back and get ready or anything?
When you get back to town, you didn't hear anything and you didn't see anything because nothing happened here. Do you understand me?
That's not true. I just saw a crash outside.
No, you get this straight. Nothing happened.
You can't tell me what to do. I'm a civilian.
And that's when he said, look, mister, somebody will be picking your bones out of the sand if you go start a lot of rumors.
Sergeant, escort this man back to the funeral home.
2 MPs came up and said, sir, we have to escort you back to your mortuary. There was a door opened into one of the supply rooms, and the nurse that I knew personally was coming out.
You better get out of here. You're gonna get in a lot of trouble. Get him out of here!
Something very drastically was wrong at the base. Naturally, I was curious and mad and couldn't believe what was happening. So the first person I thought of was to contact a nurse to see what she might know and could she bring me up to date on what was going on.
You have to promise me that you will not mention my name.
The next day, the nurse agreed to talk to Glenn if he swore to never reveal her identity.
I went into the supply room to pick up some bandages. And there were 2 officers there who ordered me to take notes.
She said that she saw that they were doing a partial autopsy.
And there were these 2 old hospital gurneys with these 2 little crash bags on top.
There was a crash bag that was open, and there was 2 very mutilated, very small bodies.
They weren't children. I'd never seen anything like that. And then one of the officers, let me draw it for you.
They turned a hand over that had been severed, and then they were explaining that it was a very fragile hand, only 4 fingers.
With little suction cups.
The head was very large, the eyes were set back. They didn't have the earlobes or anything. There was like 2 canals, like 2 ear canals. There was no teeth, that it was just like a piece of cartilage, maybe.
And they opened the next bag, and there was a whole creature in there that wasn't mutilated.
The nurse claimed to have seen 3 bodies. None of them seemed to be earthly in
It
origin.
was just horrible. I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
After Glenn left the nurse, he returned to his office. When he casually unfolded the newspaper on his desk, it was the infamous edition of the Roswell Daily Record. Glenn never saw the nurse again. A few weeks later, rumors circulated that she had died in a plane crash after being transferred out of the country. To this day, Glenn remains convinced that the details of her story are true.
There had to be some type of a body present. I don't think the nurse lied about it because I don't think she knew how to lie in the first place. And I just think something happened very unusual, and I doubt very seriously if the world will ever know what happened.
Since our interview with Glenn Dennis, other witnesses have come forward with testimony that backs up his story. At the same time, the Air Force has claimed that the alien bodies were actually dummies that were part of a parachute test. Perhaps one day, we will find conclusive evidence of UFOs. Until that time, the events at Roswell, New Mexico, remain one of the most compelling UFO mysteries ever reported. Next, a 17-year-old girl is abducted by a motorcycle gang, and her mother embarks on a lifelong search to find her. Coconut Grove, Florida. Amy Billick was 17 years old. She was a musician and a singer who also wrote poetry.
I just got home from school.
One day in March, she came home from school at around noon, as usual. She planned to meet with friends downtown for lunch.
All right. I'll see you soon. Bye.
But Amy never showed up.
I started getting a little frantic when I hadn't heard from Amy by dinner time, and I called the friend that she'd said she was going to be meeting, and the girl was quite angry. She said Amy never showed up.
Mom! 12 days after Amy disappeared, a woman phoned with shocking news.
Hello?
She said that she was a member of a motorcycle gang known as the Outlaws and told Susan that the gang had abducted Amy.
Where?
Renegade biker gangs had a reputation for causing trouble in small towns across the country. Susan learned that a chapter of the Outlaws had, in fact, roared through Coconut Grove at about the same time that Amy disappeared.
We had to consider that maybe Amy was abducted, kidnapped, taken away by these bikers. But it was always controversial with the police because these leads concerning the bikers were always vague and usually ended up nowhere.
Amy's family was desperate, and the biker connection offered a ray of hope. A family friend who had done legal work for the Outlaws arranged for Amy's parents to meet with 2 gang members.
Pleasure. I was frightened because I had never seen people like this before in my life. And here they are in my living room. I got a feeling of revulsion and hate and love at the same time. I wanted them to give me information about my child, and that was paramount. I didn't care what they looked like.
These are pictures of my daughter. She's missing.
They told me that these things do happen, that the bikers will take girls and will sell them to one another for very little, like a credit card. It takes very little to buy a girl.
I was told that you would help me.
We'll take the picture. And if she's in the Outlaw Nation, we'll let you know within 2 days.
Although the bikers promised to ask other gang members about Amy, Susan never heard from them again.
Amy could have been abducted and then sold from one individual to another. They put her out, making the money, either topless dancing, hooking, ripping off credit cards, anything that she can do to bring home the money.
For Susan, the thought of her daughter in the hands of a biker gang was unbearable. But that was where the leads pointed, and that is where she would search. On Amy's 19th birthday, a biker called Susan after seeing this picture in the paper. He told her that he had once actually owned Amy. He agreed to talk to Susan, but only if he drove her to his house.
I thought I might never see my husband again when I got on the back. But I put it in the back of my head and I got on the bike and I went.
Nobody better follow us back here, lady.
He was very nervous about it. He kept looking out the window to see if I had been followed.
Just look at this picture and tell me if that's her.
Wow. That's her. That's her.
He said she was quiet, that she didn't speak to anybody, that she was afraid of everybody. He said she was like mute, and the word kept coming up in descriptions of her through everything.
There was a scar down here.
The most pertinent information that he gave me was that Amy had a scar, and it was a scar that was hidden on her body that I had never divulged to the police or the press or anyone.
You've got to help me find her. You're my last hope.
All right.
Although the biker had agreed to help Susan find Amy, several weeks passed with no word. Finally, he called and said that Amy was with the outlaws in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Susan made plans to travel the 1,200 miles and continue her search.
We were concerned about her safety. We were concerned about the investigation. We didn't think it was a good idea, but it was impossible ever to try to discourage her from following up every lead, no matter how dangerous. She didn't care.
The biker told Susan to meet him in a bar in the roughest part of town. He promised her that he would bring Amy with him.
If Amy's in there, I want her to see me.
Look, I told her not to do nothing.
I was extremely excited. I called home and I packed my bags at my hotel because I thought I'd have to run to the airport with her. And we went to this dark bar where there were just bikers and people drinking, drunk and everything, and he sat me down somewhere and...
I'll be right back. I gotta talk to some people.
A few minutes after he walked away from me is when all hell broke loose in that bar. I was afraid that I was going to be killed.
Susan was hustled outside to a waiting taxi, as if it had all been planned ahead of time. She never saw Amy in the bar, and she never saw the biker again. Her search had hit another dead end. 13 more years passed before Susan heard another word about Amy. This time, it came from halfway around the world.
Tell me more. I want to hear about
Play
this.
music?
Yes.
Virginia Snyder was a private investigator who had been working on a different case in England. According to Snyder, a colleague was in a post office when he was approached by an American biker.
Yes?
You look like you could use a little companionship.
I'm afraid I don't quite understand you.
Look, I got a girl for you. It won't cost you much. What do you say?
The investigator, being a good investigator, engaged the man in conversation, as far as I could gather, to get as much information as he could about the girl that was being offered to him. Then, of course, he didn't buy her. He wasn't interested. And then he passed the information on to me.
American girl.
Oh.
Oyster Bay.
Oyster Bay, New York, was where Amy Billick had been born.
What's her name?
Mute.
The fact that they called her mute really affected me, because here all these years of my search, she had been mute, had not talked. And here I was faced with the same situation, but in another country.
Perhaps you have a photograph you could show me?
This strange encounter with the British investigator came to nothing. It was just another clue, another painful near miss in a mother's endless search for her daughter. Update. In a deathbed confession, a former member of the biker gang that kidnapped Amy said that she had been drugged, raped, and killed soon after being abducted. Police were able to verify some details of the biker's account. Unfortunately, by the time he confessed, both of Amy's parents had died, and they never learned what happened to their daughter. Next, the story of the brutal shotgun slaying of 3 men on a back road in Tennessee. Signal Mountain, Tennessee. Earl Smock, Kenneth Griffith, and his father-in-law, Richard Mason, warmed up their engines before taking off for a ride on the local back roads.
They got on their motors and revved them up, and they couldn't wait to get out. They were ready to go because they knew they had a few hours of daylight time.
At 6 p.m., the 3 men left Mason's home on their ATVs. By daybreak the next morning, they had not returned.
When I woke up, I realized that they weren't home. My feeling was maybe it was cloudy that night and they couldn't find their way back. But I knew deep down that wasn't what happened, that something was wrong.
All 3 men were skilled riders and knew the local trails. Fearing foul play, friends and family began to search. A few hours later, on Roberts Mill Road, about 5 miles from the Mason home, a local resident stopped to check his tire. He spotted 3 ATVs covered with blood in a trash dump at the bottom of a bluff. He called the police.
The dispatcher requested for us to respond to that area. They at this time informed us that 3 men from Signal Mountain had left a day earlier going on a ride and had never returned home.
When police arrived, a neighbor told them that he had heard gunshots the night before, the same night that the men had disappeared.
I heard 3 shots, might have been 4.
And he was sure from his experience that they came from a particular place that he called the Gate. We had never been back in this particular area. And of course, this is where we wanted to look, is where the shots were heard.
When police searched the Gate, they found ATV tire tracks. Nothing else seemed out of the ordinary until they approached an area posted with no trespassing signs.
And as we came to that section, Roy had noticed a green fly had landed on him.
There has to be something around here.
And he made a comment that this green fly is in this area. We need to look because they're usually after decaying flesh.
A short distance away, just off the road, searchers discovered a spot of blood.
Hey, come here, look at this.
At this time, we found a section that appeared that something had been dragged through the woods, through the grass. And we did find a pool of blood. And after finding this, we roped the area off and advised at the command post that we think we had found the crime scene.
It wasn't long before police uncovered human tissue and bone fragments. Although no bodies were found at the scene, they were certain that this was the spot where the 3 missing men had been killed. The bodies of Kenneth Griffith, Earl Smock, and Richard Mason were discovered 2 days later at another dump site 11 miles from the crime scene. All 3 men had been killed with a shotgun. Police tried to make sense of the evidence, which was now scattered over a large area. The 3 men left from the Mason home, which is located here. The murder site was here, 3 miles to the north. The ATVs were found here, near Roberts Mill Road. The bodies were dumped here, 11 miles from the crime scene. Based on the physical evidence, police reconstructed the crime.
It appears that the 3 men were riding the dirt road. They came to the area of the fence. At that time, they were surprised by someone. Hey, buddy, and it appeared that Kenneth Griffith was apparently the first one that was shot. He was shot in the left side of the head and apparently killed him instantly. Further indications are that Richard Mason was the second man that was shot. He had 1 shot to the chest area. Earl Smock was shot directly into the right shoulder. It appeared that he got off of his 3-wheeler and attempted to get away. The second shot went into the side through the heart, and that was a fatal wound. 16 years in the business. It is my opinion that this is one of the most brutal, uncalled for murders ever.
Police believe that after shooting the three men, the killer tried to cover up the evidence at the crime scene. Then, with the help of at least one accomplice, he disposed of the bodies and the ATVs. One eyewitness reported seeing two men in a pickup truck on Roberts Mill Road the same night the victims disappeared. There were 3 ATVs in the back of the truck. Another witness reported seeing a woman frantically trying to prevent drivers from going down Roberts Mill Road.
You can't get through. There's an accident down the road.
She was just a quarter mile from where the ATVs were dropped. Police speculated that after the killer and his accomplice dumped the ATVs, they then returned to the crime scene to retrieve the bodies. They then drove 11 miles to the Suck Creek Road dump site.
It's obvious that whoever put the bodies there wanted the bodies to be found sooner than what they were in order to keep the actual crime scene from ever being found. And had they been found on a Monday instead of on Wednesday, then the actual crime scene at the fence would have never been found.
Police were convinced that the killer was a local resident because it appeared he had detailed knowledge of the back roads on Signal Mountain.
The people in the area are afraid to come forward, not fear of it happening again in that area, but fear that who was involved in it, if they say anything, will get them.
Update. After a tip from one of our viewers, a local resident named Frank Castile was arrested and charged with the 3 murders. Castile owned property in the area, and he was unhappy about ATV riders trespassing on his land. He was eventually convicted of the 3 killings and sentenced to life in prison. Frank Castile will not be eligible for parole until 2029. Next, 2 escaped convicts go on a rampage that stretches across 8 states and kills 4 innocent people. Durant, Oklahoma.
Yeah, St. Clair, what do you want?
Michael St. Clair has been convicted of murder twice, and now he's awaiting trial on a 3rd charge.
What's the matter with you?
St. Clair Springs fellow inmate Dennis Reese, who is awaiting trial for robbery and murder. The night they escape, St. Clair and Reese embark on a bloody crime spree that stretches across 8 states and leaves 4 innocent people dead. Before his escape, Michael St. Clair had been convicted on 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms.
Michael St. Clair has been involved with various drug trafficking organizations in southern Oklahoma as well as northern Texas. His uncle was moving in on his drug operations, and he felt that his profits were being threatened, so he contracted out to have his uncle killed. After his uncle was killed, he then assassinated the hitman.
2 days after they escaped, a newspaper reporter named Tom Mullins received a phone call from Michael St. Clair.
Just a minute, man. Let me get my tape recorder here. For almost 20 months now, I've been covering Michael St. Clair. I've gotten to know him fairly well. When he got out, I was the obvious choice for him to get his message out, that message being that he wouldn't be taken alive, and that when the time came, anyone wearing a badge I'll kill, and he will go down pulling the trigger.
3 weeks later, near Elizabethtown, Kentucky, a state trooper pulled over a pickup truck which was seen fleeing from a burning vehicle.
As the pickup truck came to a halt, the man on the passenger side, who we now believe was St. Clair, instantly got out of the truck. The man fired at the trooper's car 2 times. The trooper, fortunately, was not injured at all. Within just a matter of minutes, the maroon truck was actually found disabled and abandoned along the interstate. Apparently, it had crossed the interstate and in doing so had blown both front tires.
The truck belonged to 56-year-old Francis Brady, a retired father of 3. Brady had disappeared 12 hours earlier after cashing a check at a gas station.
Brady's body was found approximately 12 miles north of Elizabethtown, Kentucky. He had been shot execution style. He had been handcuffed and had been shot in the head. What is remarkable about this type of execution is that it's almost identical to the way St. Clair's uncle, Ronnie St. Clair, had been executed a few years before.
The burned-out vehicle was registered to a Denver, Colorado paramedic named Tim Keeling. Like Francis Brady, Keeling also vanished after patronizing a convenience store. His body was found in a ditch outside of Clayton, New Mexico.
Tim Keeling had been shot in the head. It appeared that his body had been dropped along the roadside there in New Mexico.
5 days later, St. Clair and Reese struck again, this time in Milan, Tennessee. They shot a store clerk, execution style. She was 20 years old and the mother of 2 small children. Soon after, the young female clerk of another video store 8 miles away was also gunned down in cold blood.
Individuals who would kill for $150 or $200 are extremely desperate individuals. It indicates that they do not have any type of support apparatus going for them. They're very concerned about staying in one location for any period of time. They're very paranoid, they're very dangerous, and will take any actions to prevent their apprehension.
Update. Michael St. Clair and Dennis Reese are no longer a threat to anyone. They have both been captured. St. Clair was sentenced to life without parole for killing Frank Brady. Reese was convicted of murder and kidnapping and was sentenced to life in prison.